was about 5 when I reached the age of reason, as most people are. Maybe 4, I don't know. It seems to me that there was a little more reasoning going on than usual. And one of the things I'd figured out was I learned about fighting, and I learned about loving. I understood peace, violence. I understood violence and nonviolence. And that was the curious thing. Perhaps I absorbed it from the zeitgeist of the 60s, being that it was the season, the decade of peace and love going on there. But it felt instinctive. It felt like I instinctively knew that pacifism was the only right course. That if you want to be right and good and just and honest and if you want to all that positive qualities of character, and I did, that nonviolence was part of it. And it seemed to me all the best people were nonviolent. Even though I didn't know about Gandhi, and I didn't know most of them. I didn't know about even Martin Luther King at the time. I was like 5 years old. I knew about kindergarten. But I knew that peace was the right. And people would say to me, "Oh, what if a man is murdering your family? Then are you peaceful?" I didn't have an answer, but it didn't change my certainty. I was not persuaded. I knew that you'd solve that problem too, that sometimes you have to endure great tragedy and great suffering. And there's no way around it. And violence doesn't make it go away. Violence makes it worse. But I didn't have the words to say it, and anyways, I was just a little girl. And when it comes to voice, no one has less voice than a little girl. Even dogs have more voice than a little girl's. Because she's both child and female. And I had no voice. But I had an opinion. And over the years, my opinion has gotten stronger, not weaker. I still think that there is no cause great enough for violence. No cause great enough to warrant feeling hatred in your heart for someone else on the level that you would actually cause them suffering or even end them. I don't consider death to be a cruel thing to do compared to torture, and taking someone's loved ones. Simply killing them, people die all the time. Things die. Sometimes death is a mercy. Death in and of itself, no, that's not the problem. The problem here is living in stress and strife. There are children in the United States getting up and going to school with violence on their minds, fear in their hearts. Every morning they are reminded that fear stalks their streets. That without warning, at any time, someone, possibly even one of them, will show up with a deadly weapon and take all their lives. Or take some of them and leave the rest grieving. They're reminded this when they do lockdown drills. They're reminded when they go through metal detectors. They're reminded when they see a gun on the hip of a teacher or a security guard. Reminded constantly that their life is under threat during peacetime. Because every time there's gun violence, their parents respond with more violence. The big phrase right now is, a good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun every time. And they ignore things like, there was a good guy with a gun on the scene and he didn't do a damn thing. Or, they had a shootout in the street. 11 bystanders were killed. 3 cops were killed. And in the end, they got the guy. During a shootout in the street. Because they see no other way. And they will not take away they cannot see. They will not strike out blind on principle, like a wanderer who strikes out in a direction and maintains that direction, even when roads wend past his way, or mountains stand athwart it. Still, he keeps his direction because he has a long-term goal in mind. Rather, it is more like the wandering city streets of some medieval town. When it comes to morals, it's a morass. It's an absolute maze of confusion. There's no guiding principle anymore. There's just a whole lot of fear. People running blindly in fear, thinking through fear that violence is going to solve it. And what I learned over all these years with violence and peace was that when you hold peace in your heart and you follow it like a north star, and you absolutely, to the very depth of you, know that you will not take up arms, you will not learn to fight, you will not witness or in any way validate violence or violent approaches, you soon discover that violence doesn't happen around you. It's magic. It's a magic thing. When I'm in the room, people hold their temper. They don't get violent. Now maybe they're scared of me. I do have a bit of a temper, and I can't say I've never been violent. I have. I once held a girl by her shoulders up against the wall about 6 inches off the floor, even though she was a head and a half taller than me. She'd been bullying me for weeks, and she dinked me in the back of the head with something sharp and hard, and it hurt, and I woke up from a red haze with this girl in front of me with her toes dangling, shouting in her face about how I didn't deserve the way I was being treated, and I wanted her to stop. As soon as I realized what I was doing, I dropped her and I fled in tears. That was one example. I once tried to choke a woman, again after a hard campaign of abuse and cruelty towards me. She had decided that she was going to set her ways to drive me out by hook or by crook, by any means necessary, and had pretty much spent her time devising ways to disturb and upset me, to cause problems for me, to make my life a living hell so that I would leave. I had nowhere to go, wasn't going to leave, so I just kept gritting my teeth and bullying through, and okay, fine, I'll change what I'm doing then, and just being cooperative. And finally one day when she asked too much of me, I just set down what I was doing. I turned to her and grabbed her by the throat and started telling her, with my hand around her throat, that I was sick and tired of this crap and I wanted her to stop. Woke from the red haze, realized what I was doing, and ran out barefoot into the snow. Well, she called the police, gave them an incorrect name, but she didn't know my actual name. And I went home hunting, because we were roommating. Well, she was my landlady. She was the welfare recipient who was illegally taking money for renting 2 of the rooms in her home to strangers. Years later, she and her husband got arrested for fraud, finally. It took a while for the law to catch up with her. But at any rate, I've always felt ashamed. I mean, certainly these were people who deserved it and begged for it, and they provoked me. And I stood up under it with great forbearance, but it doesn't change the fact that I didn't want to resort to the violence. When it comes to guns, I feel the same way. In terms of national policy, I think Canada's doing a pretty good job. We don't have children shooting each other in the schools. I go to the mall and I don't wear a bulletproof vest, and there's no metal detectors and there's no armed guards. There's guys running around, but they're not wearing bulletproof vests either. I live in a country that people don't have gun violence on their minds every morning when they start school or work. It's not something that is foremost in the national mind. So I don't know exactly what Canada's doing. I mean, I can go buy a gun today I'm pretty sure I could just pop on down to the hardware store and pick me up a rifle. They're for sale there. You have to prove you're over 18, but I don't think you need a permit. I think you're supposed to register it on the long gun registry, or maybe they gave up on that because they didn't have the bureaucracy. They wanted to know where all of the long guns are. Long gun versus pistol. Now, if I want to carry a concealed handgun, or something that's a semi-automatic, then I need to go through hoops. I need to jump through hoops. And that's fine, because it's pretty hard to conceal a rifle. They'll see you coming, you know. In Hollywood, they conceal rifles under coats and stuff, but that's a great way to shoot your foot off, really. You know, it's not very effective. So, when it comes to politics, I think Canada seems to have a pretty good balance. The hunters and the farmers all have their rifles. People who want to be in handgun clubs have handguns. I've held a handgun. Legal or illegal, I don't know. It was a tense night when we were getting a woman away from her abusive husband, and a friend of mine dragged out his guns and freaked us all out, and nobody was too pleased about that. He took it a step too far. He was the militiaman type. I think he was an American. And, you know, he brought this box of guns in, and everybody was like, I don't think we want to go there, buddy. And I think that's the thing that, you know, that's a form of pacifism. It's not an extreme form where you refuse to learn Tai Chi because it's fighting moves. But, you know, oh dear me, I'm trying to get all this glass on the drain board so it doesn't fall off and break. It's quite the challenge some days. Oh, I do have a tea towel. I could dry them, but this is more entertaining. It's a puzzle. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. So, I think what happens when you dedicate yourself to the concept of pacifism and strive for it with your whole heart, violence doesn't happen around you. And what that means on a global scale is that if everybody committed to nonviolence, there would be an end to the cruelty of one man against another. Now, there's never going to happen. Forget about it. But just imagine if 3 of the people in the room with you at any given time were all committed pacifists. Now, I'm not talking about cowards who run and shiver behind a couch. They're going to walk up, stand up. They've got the courage of a warrior. They will stand shoulder to shoulder, look the bully in the eyes and say, no, we refuse. And then the bully will have to run through them. Maybe in Game of Thrones he will. But this is the real world. This is a world where the bully really just wants everybody to think he's amazing. And if most of the people in the room are standing there saying no, he's going to back down. He's going to back down to show them all that he could be magnanimous and that he can be a nice guy. Actually, what do you do about the lone gunman? Well, for one thing, it's a lot harder for him to get his paws on a gun out here in Canada. He's got to go through some channels. He's got to go through a few channels, and because of our anti-gun culture, or not anti-gun, our non-gun culture, because guns aren't part of our national identity and our culture, they're not going to just hand him a gun saying, you're right, you should have a gun, your rights are being abridged. They're not going to do that. They're going to be like, why should I give you a gun? What are you going to do with it? He's going to be vetted even by the very criminals from whom he wishes to purchase that gun. Gun control isn't the same thing as taking away a man's right to bear arms. Which, by the way, really just means that the crown isn't... That's the thing, there's no crown. They act like a kingdom down there. Your government is supposed to be you, government of the people. What they meant was that no foreign ruler is going to be able to come over here and find our population unarmed. They meant for something kind of like what the Swiss do, where everybody goes through a couple of years of militia training. Everybody is issued a weapon that they've been taught how to use. And during that training, you know, psychopaths are weeded out or put to good purpose or whatever it is that they do with them. And they have a chance to teach principles and ideas to people. And so that was, I think, what the American founding fathers were imagining, was that people would have a way to take up a weapon and fight back should the King of England or some other European king, as they were wont to do, or perhaps an Asian one, choose to overthrow the new republic and enslave its people again as peasants and thralls. And it's a different world out there now. It doesn't work that way anymore. There's too many people. They're too much united by a common nationality. Just wiping. I really want to wipe that counter over there. Yeah, so gun control rant, I guess. Anti-violence rant. My views on pacifism. I'll quit here.